Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
What business trip? In an hour, Mom and sister are coming. Get to the kitchen quickly, Mom needs that turkey with sauce. But when the hurt wife said, Irma looked at Sergio, the man she once considered so close, so understanding, and couldn't believe what he had just said. Her husband, of course, had always treated his mother and sister with love and tenderness, trying to take care of them. How could it be otherwise? The father of the family had died when his son and daughter were still in school. Thus, Sergio, then still a teenager, remained the only man and the main support for his closest female relatives. From a young age, he felt a responsibility for his mother and sister, protecting, guarding, and supporting them. Undoubtedly, these are admirable qualities. Initially, Irma was impressed by Sergio's attitude towards his family. But soon, the woman realized that her husband was simply being taken advantage of. What could she do? Such were the relationships between the relatives, so it had to be. It wasn't her place to meddle in the affairs of these already grown people. Only now, the situation somehow started to get out of control. Soon, Irma also found herself owing something to her mother-in-law and sister-in-law. The reason? Probably because Irma dared to take away the only helper from their family. Moreover, Irma was young, well-educated. And most importantly, she was married to a wonderful man. She had a reliable, loving husband. How lucky she was. And as for Christie, Sergio's sister, her life had not turned out well. Her beloved left her pregnant and disappeared somewhere far away, untraceable. And now the poor girl was dragging along a son all by herself. As for the mother-in-law, Anna, she had been left to raise 2 children alone after becoming a widow. No health to speak of, no strength left. She still had to help her daughter and grandson. Such were the 2 helpless, unfortunate women with complicated destinies. Not like the lucky Irma. She, after all, had so much happiness fall into her lap. So, she owed some support to these 2 deprived women. Such was the strange logic. Irma had overlooked all this until now, but what Sergio said to her today was too much. That's why Irma couldn't hold back any longer and confronted her husband with everything that had been accumulating for so long. And somehow, she immediately felt lighter. Even Sergio seemed to reflect. Saying such words was not typical for Irma. But now, she regretted nothing. On the contrary, she was even happy. She had finally resolved, finally managed. Irma and Sergio met right after graduating from university. They got jobs at the same company. He was in the engineering department, and she was in the planning and economics department. Both were quite young, inexperienced professionals, eager to work, ambitious in a way, energetic. They had a lot in common. Naturally, the young people got to know each other quickly and an instant attraction arose between them. Sergio did not hide his feelings. He spoke about them directly to his young friend. It was pleasant for her to hear such sincere words, she even got goosebumps. Moreover, she felt the same way. She really liked this handsome and, beyond his years, serious and responsible young man. Sergio and Irma got to know each other closer. The girl now understood where Sergio got his industriousness and practicality, qualities that immediately made it clear that with such a guy, one would not be lost. From his teenage years, Sergio took on the role of the head of the family. His mother and sister had been bewildered and stunned for a long time after the incident. The boy had to take matters into his own hands and start caring for his relatives. Sergio was responsible for all the male work around the house, fixing faucets, wallpapering, dealing with non-working switches. He even started working part-time. First at a car wash after school lessons, then he got a job as a server at a fast food restaurant. Because his mother was paid mere pennies at work and she couldn't look for a new job. The reason was endless illnesses. Who needs such an employee? And the theater, where the mother worked as a cloakroom attendant, was nearby, making it convenient to get to. There were a whole bunch of other reasons. So, Sergio helped his family. How could it be otherwise? Who, if not him? Christie was Sergio's younger sister, close in age, but while Sergio matured quickly after their father's death, Christie remained a touching, defenseless child for a long time. Well, she was just a girl. Their mother always instilled in Sergio that he must protect and care for his sister. She was so fragile, so delicate, so naive. But Sergio did his best within his capabilities. He sought his mother's approval and wanted to live in a way that his father, who was no longer with them, could be proud of. Irma understood all this from her beloved's stories. Sergio himself didn't even realize that his mother and sister were simply manipulating him, playing on his noble feelings. But then, the young woman didn't dare express her opinion to the young man. Firstly, she was not sure about her own conclusions. Secondly, she understood that meddling in someone else's family affairs was the last thing to do, but she felt sorry for Sergio. He was exhausting himself, trying to build his career and be good for his mother and Christie. He was very tired, of course. From childhood, Christie was a capricious, spoiled creature, demanding attention and adoration. Such was her character. The girl did not possess outstanding features, ordinary, unremarkable appearance, short, slightly plump. However, her eyes were beautiful, of course, a striking turquoise shade. Christie always emphasized this unique color with makeup and clothing, and considered herself an irresistible beauty, and smart to boot. Christie started dating boys early. They gave her what she liked, admiring looks, compliments, attention, in short. Of course, it wasn't free. But Christie was ready for a barter to feel unique and popular. No wonder, boys flocked to her, making other girls envious. And all because Christie had found an easy path to such fame. Not too high a price to feel like a school queen. But in Irma's firm belief, Christie was a queen only in her own eyes. Of course, everyone understood, but nonetheless. Sergio was troubled by his sister's tumultuous personal life. He felt responsible for Christie. But the boy couldn't cope. Simply physically lacked the strength. School, and also work, how could he keep an eye on the young beauty? The mother of the family saw nothing reprehensible in her daughter's numerous romances. What's wrong with that? Christie is a beautiful girl. She has the right to go out and meet whoever she wants. She is a smart girl. She won't make mistakes. She'll find herself a rich husband, live like a human being. Is that bad? I look at her and realize I missed out on a lot in my youth. Christie is doing well. When else to enjoy life, if not in youth? Of course, Sergio did not tell his mother about the rumors that circulated at school about his sister. Why worry the mother? He tried to deal with Christie's suitors himself. But what could he do when his sister herself was against his intervention? Time passed. Sergio finished school and got admitted to a university on a budget program. Anna, of course, was happy for her elder, but shared her worries as well. I thought you had grown up, would start earning well now. At least on that construction site. Do you know how much Wanda's grandson earns there without any education? And you're going back to study. What about us? Sergio assured his mother that he would not quit his part-time job at the cafe and might even find something better. Anna seemed to calm down a bit. Christie's last year of school was quite eventful. She had a new beau, not just any snotty boy her age. She met a young businessman online, or at least, that's how the guy introduced himself. He lived in a distant city, on the other end of the country, and owned his own business, something to do with fish supply. Christie didn't delve into the details, she wasn't too interested. What captivated the young lady were the photos of Ivan. There he was, driving his luxurious foreign car somewhere, posing against palm trees at an expensive resort. The young man lived a lavish lifestyle. Clearly, his business was successful. After the New Year holidays, Ivan decided to visit his beloved. Yes, beloved indeed. By that time, their long-distance relationship had already gathered significant momentum. Of course, Christie didn't inform any of her relatives. She took her time getting dolled up for the meeting with her beloved. Sergio immediately understood that his sister was getting ready for a date. He tried to ask questions, but the girl, of course, didn't confess. Only much later did she tell her brother the truth, when it was already too late. And Christie disappeared for 3 days. Not entirely, of course. She called her mother, lying that she was staying over at one friend's house or another. Anna believed her, unlike Sergio, who suspected something. Later it was discovered that Ivan had booked a room for 3 days in a local hotel. Not the best in the city, as Christie had hoped, but still. Ivan turned out to be a rather stingy businessman. He didn't splash out on money, didn't take his beloved to restaurants, settling instead for ordering pizza directly to the room. He spoke many sweet words to his young lover, and she tried her best to please him, to charm him even more because Christie desperately wanted Ivan to take her with him to his rich, glamorous life with resorts, expensive cars, and beautiful houses. 3 days later, Ivan told her he needed to go home to handle some work-related issues. They parted on good terms, but then the young man simply disappeared, stopped communicating, and for some reason deleted his social media page. Now Christie couldn't even contact him. The girl cried for several days straight from such betrayal. She had already seen herself as the businessman's wife. She wouldn't have had to work or study. What a letdown. But the girl quickly pulled herself together, started a new romance to distract herself. And 3 months later, just before her final exams, it turned out that Christie was pregnant, and the term was already significant. Abortion was no longer an option. By the dates, the father of the child was that elusive businessman. Christie knew neither his phone number nor his address. They had only communicated on social networks, but the young man had deleted his account immediately after he left Christie supposedly for work reasons. Sergio then found acquaintances who helped him restore Ivan's page. It quickly became clear that all his photos, which depicted the luxurious life of a successful businessman, were just the products of Photoshop. The real Ivan, if he was even called Ivan, was now impossible to find. There was no hope that he would appear on his own. So, that's how another nephew appeared in Sergio's family, whom the young mother, Christie, named Miguel. A cute, big-eyed little boy. Of course, after finishing school, the pregnant Christie didn't even think about enrolling anywhere. How could she study and raise a child? It was an overwhelming task, too much for most to handle. Her mother supported her daughter's decision, although Sergio had a different opinion. He believed that his sister could study remotely, especially since their mother worked part-time and could look after the child. But Sergio's female relatives thought differently, and he accepted their choice. The young man had to look for a better-paying part-time job. After all, another person had joined their family. So, they lived and raised Miguel together. Christie did not study and had no plans to. She occasionally worked, but quickly grew tired and resigned to stay with the child. Miguel was already a first grader when Sergio and Irma met. A sensible and quite independent boy for his age. Irma did not understand why he needed constant supervision. Indeed, Christie didn't really watch him closely. Miguel was often in the care of his grandmother because his mother needed to arrange her personal life and catch up on what she had missed, being first pregnant and then a single, young mother of an infant. Anna and Christie were clearly not pleased with the news of Sergio's marriage. No wonder, they considered him their support and helper, almost like their own property. However, initially, they had a great relationship with Irma. Anna loudly rejoiced that she had gained a second daughter. Yes, that's exactly how she referred to Irma. Irma was pleased, although a bit uncomfortable. Christie echoed her mother and repeated time and again that she had always dreamed of having a sister. Miguel also took to Irma right away. The girl noticed that the boy lacked attention. He might have been living with his grandmother and mother, but they didn't particularly bother with his development. Both were too preoccupied. Anna had endless gatherings with friends and doctor visits in search of ailments. Christie was entirely focused on building her personal life. Initially, Irma and Christie even became friends. The girls found they had many topics to talk about, being close in age. and Irma found it interesting to listen to Christie's adventures. It all sounded like the plot of some TV series. Christie was indeed a fantastic storyteller. Overall, things were going very well. Irma and Sergio got married, took out a mortgage on a large, prestigious apartment. The payments were immense, but both were working and figured they could manage the amount. True, they had to cut back in many areas, but the spouses knew what they were striving for. They both decided that they should not rush into having children. First, they needed to get on their feet, create a material base, and then think about kids. They dreamed of having a child, but understood it was not the time yet. Miguel often visited their home. Christie, without warning, sometimes just brought him over in the evening. Luckily, they lived not far from each other. "Could he stay over with you tonight?" "I have a date, and I think it will last till morning," Christie giggled, "and Mom has high blood pressure." "Could you help out?" Irma, of course, nodded affirmatively. What choice did she have? They were relatives, after all, and supposed to help each other. It didn't matter that Sergio was away on business and Irma had taken work home. She had to entertain Miguel. No, the boy was quiet, calm, undemanding. She could have just sat him in front of the TV or turned on a laptop for him, but Irma couldn't do that. She had a child visiting, so she needed to cook something tasty for him, entertain him, take him for a walk. So, Irma ended up playing nanny in the evenings. Sometimes Christie disappeared for several days, and Miguel lived with Irma and Sergio during that time because Ana had either high blood pressure, a trip to a cottage with friends, or a clinic visit. Well, what could they do? Family is family. At every meeting, Ana always smiled joyfully at Irma, often remarking how lucky her daughter-in-law was, a wonderful husband and a nice apartment. At the same time, she lamented that her own daughter, unfortunately, always encountered unworthy suitors. Irma could have explained why this was happening. She had witnessed many of Christie's fleeting romances but kept silent. Why stir up unnecessary conflicts? Though Irma was beginning to be annoyed by the sudden visits from her mother-in-law and the constant babysitting of the nephew, an unwanted boy who seemed only to hinder his mother and grandmother. Miguel grew fond of Sergio and loved Irma. Ana and Christie took advantage of this, trying to leave the boy with the couple as often as possible. Several years passed. Sergio's earnings had increased significantly. He became the head of a large department. The workload was enormous, but the pay was corresponding. And the spouses decided it was time. Time, at last, to realize their dreams of having children. Ana had long been asking for more grandchildren. Irma did not understand why she wanted them. The grandmother wasn't eager to spend time with Miguel. But the mother-in-law often brought up the topic of children, claiming they shouldn't wait. "You're both getting older," she reasoned. "Sergio is fine, he's a man. He can become a father even at 70. But a woman's life is short. You need to have kids sooner, to ensure they're healthy and strong. Old women usually have sickly babies. We don't want that." Irma, of course, was uncomfortable listening to such talk. But there was some truth in her mother-in-law's words. "Mom, everything will happen in due time," Sergio reassured his mother. "We have other plans right now." Other plans? Or is it just not happening for you? Can't make it happen? Maybe there's something wrong with your health? Initially, Irma tried to dissuade Ana from her conclusions. Then she gave up. If Ana believed that her daughter-in-law had fertility issues, so be it. It didn't affect Irma. However, the mother-in-law almost seemed to rejoice in this. Yes, she dreamed of grandchildren and lamented that the young couple didn't have children yet. But at the same time, she was proud of her daughter. Christie had no problems with childbearing. Look at the boy she had brought into the world, and Miguel was even an excellent student. The fact that Christie had Miguel just after finishing school wasn't considered. And Miguel was only an excellent student because he often visited Irma and Sergio. They both helped the boy with his homework. Irma herself taught him to read. It took a lot of time and effort, but she managed. She succeeded because the first grader, barely knowing the letters, was already having problems with school, and Irma felt sorry for the boy. By the way, Miguel turned out to be quite a bright little guy. The fact that he couldn't read, write, or count by the time he started school was an oversight by his mother and grandmother. They hardly spent any time on his education, nor did they take him to any preparatory courses for school. Nowadays, everyone is already prepared when they go to school. Irma didn't have children of her own, yet even she knew this. Irma wanted to say a lot to her mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but she held back. She didn't want to ruin their relationship. A bad peace is better than a good quarrel. That's exactly what they had, a bad peace. Her relatives irritated Irma, many things about their behavior bothered her. And they, apparently, talked about their daughter-in-law behind her back. It was very palpable. But both sides behaved decently on the surface. Then finally, the time came when Sergio and Irma decided it was time for them to become parents. The spouses approached this matter thoroughly and seriously. Both underwent medical examinations and received a doctor's report that everything was fine with them, and only then did they start planning for a baby. Everything happened too quickly, almost on the first try. Irma was surprised to see the 2 lines on the test, but was also delighted. A wave of warmth and tenderness flooded her heart. Sergio was very happy too. At the due time, their daughter Mina was born. The young parents' happiness knew no bounds. The girl was sturdy and healthy, a perfect infant. Anna now often visited her granddaughter and daughter-in-law, as she believed the young mother needed help. "I always dreamed of having a daughter," the elderly woman confided to her daughter-in-law. "First Sergio was born, and I was disappointed. Then Christie, a light in the window. Daughters are a mother's joy. Boys? They're just a severed chunk. You can't imagine how upset I was when I found out Christie would have a boy. But what can you do?" Irma looked at her mother-in-law in puzzlement. She spoke such words without any concern that her son and grandson could hear them. And they seemed not to pay any attention. They probably got used to their mother and grandmother and her tactless, to put it mildly, remarks. Even Miguel appeared quite indifferent to these words. Of course, a young mother could use some help, on the one hand. But Mina was a surprisingly calm child. A gift, so to speak. She slept, walked, smiled. Anna's visits, on the other hand, brought Irma extra problems. The grandmother would fuss over the granddaughter for 5 minutes, then demand coffee and conversation. Basically, not much help, just problems. But Irma did not show her dissatisfaction because, well, it's the grandmother. She had the right to see her granddaughter whenever she wanted. Irma did not intend to hinder their interaction, especially since Anna had dreamed specifically of a granddaughter. From Miguel, who was already 10 years old by then, Irma saw more help. The teenager would sometimes pop in from his walk to his aunt and cousin. He entertained Mina, asked if anything was needed from the store. And Irma almost always needed something, either milk was running out or bread. And when Mina got a little older, Miguel even stayed with her for short periods. He entertained her with toys, told the little girl stories. Irma, of course, tried not to take advantage of the teenager's help too much, but Miguel seemed to want to be needed. He was eager to help in any way he could. Maternity leave flew by quickly. Irma returned to work, and Mina started going to daycare. That's when the endless sick days began. Irma realized that she couldn't pursue her career at the same pace as before. She constantly had to stay home with her sick daughter. Sergio couldn't leave his job, he held a very responsible position. So, Irma had to handle it all by herself. She really counted on help from Christie and Anna. After all, neither of them really worked consistently. They scraped by on benefits and a pension. And Sergio helped them too. Irma knew this and did not object, although she still couldn't fully understand why Christie wouldn't finally get a job. Miguel was quite grown up and independent by then. In any case, Mina's grandmother and aunt were absolutely free, and they both had so dreamed of having a granddaughter and niece, so delighted that Irma and Sergio had a girl. They seemed like the ideal helpers. Moreover, one good turn deserves another. When Miguel was little, Irma helped her relatives. She often took care of the boy. Here was their chance to repay the favor. But no such luck. Whenever Anna heard a request to watch her granddaughter, all her chronic illnesses flared up, her blood pressure, her heart, her headaches. And Christie always had 1,000 urgent things to do. Soon Irma stopped asking them for help. She realized it was futile. But she also didn't want to give up her career. So, the couple decided to hire a nanny. It was a bit scary at first to leave the little one with a stranger. Here Miguel was a great help. After school, he consistently stopped by to check on his little cousin. The boy would report back to the worried parents about the situation. Everything was always fine. The nanny turned out to be wonderful. One day, without consulting her son, Anna decided to start her own business. She became a distributor of expensive household cleaning products. Money was tight in the family, yes. At the theater wardrobe, Anna earned a pittance. Christie didn't even think about working. Slaving away for someone else was not for her, rather, she periodically tried, but Christie quickly ran out of steam and quit. The official reason was always Miguel, he needed care and attention. Only, neither of those did the boy ever see from his mother. Instead, he got nothing but reproaches and complaints. So, the boy preferred to spend most of his time at his uncle's apartment or outside. Then Anna stumbled upon what seemed like an easy way to earn money. True, it required a significant investment. So, the elderly woman took out a loan against her apartment. She stocked up on household cleaning products, which were supposed to significantly ease the lives of housewives. The descriptions claimed they were miracle products. But in reality, things were not so rosy. Of course, the business didn't take off. Anna kept silent about her problem until the last moment, always wanting to appear as a successful businesswoman in the eyes of her relatives and friends. She only turned to her son for help when bailiffs came to list the property for auction. By then, the apartment was practically owned by the bank, not her. Upon learning what his mother had done, Sergio was distraught. He had a major argument with Anna and his sister. Irma even had to calm him down. She was also astounded by the foolishness of these women. But what was done. Now they had to deal with the problems. Sergio hired lawyers. They were professionals in their field. But even they could not help. Anna and Christie ended up without a home, and of course, so did Miguel. Where to go? Sergio invited the relatives to his apartment and allocated 2 large rooms to them. Mina had to move to a smaller room from her spacious nursery because that's where Anna and Christie now lived. Irma tentatively suggested to Sergio that perhaps they could help the relatives rent an apartment instead, to which she received a furious rebuke. It was probably the first time she ever encountered such a response from her husband. "These are my closest people. They are in trouble now. We must stick together and help each other in difficult times." But, no buts. Mom is right. You do look down on them just because you've been luckier in life. That stung. Both that Sergio took his family's side and the unfair reproach. Irma had always tried to be polite with Sergio's mother and sister, though much of their behavior hurt and offended her. Living together with her sister-in-law and mother-in-law turned out to be quite the ordeal for Irma. Christie and Anna often tried to impose their own rules and disrupt the routine of the young family. And Anna was absolutely unhappy with how her daughter-in-law managed the household. She thought Irma used groceries wastefully, cleaned too infrequently, and raised her child all wrong. Sergio, meanwhile, was at work all day, stayed late, and traveled for business. So, the brunt of it all fell on Irma. It was hard for her. Even at home, she couldn't relax or rest, because, in Anna's opinion, a mother and housewife should always be busy with chores, even if she was exhausted from work. Sometimes Anna would try to help her inept daughter-in-law. It would have been better if she didn't. Afterwards, Irma couldn't find her belongings or would discover them in the most unexpected places. And then there were the dishes and clothes Anna ruined, not intentionally, of course. She just didn't know how to wash delicate fabrics or clean special-coated cookware. Irma endured it, thinking, at least at the time, that Anna genuinely wanted to help. Fortunately, Christie didn't meddle as much. She was hardly ever home, being preoccupied with a new suitor. They were constantly traveling to spas and local resorts. Anna was proud that such an important, wealthy man had taken notice of Christie. The fact that he was married didn't seem to matter, nor did the fact that Miguel, Christie's teenage son, was left to fend for himself during a difficult time. Miguel was in 9th grade and needed guidance on his future career, but no one in the family seemed to care. Anna quickly started acting like the mistress of Sergio's apartment. After all, she had raised Sergio, helped him succeed, and took full credit for everything he had achieved. Things got to the point where Irma began to feel like a guest in her own home. Anna would tell her what to do, when and what to cook, and even what time to go to bed. Irma tried to push back, but Anna would loudly express her hurt feelings, sometimes even pretending to cry. Irma would feel lost and end up apologizing. She tried complaining to her husband, but his responses were cold and dismissive. Sergio, who usually understood and supported her, suddenly acted differently. It was strange, painful, and hurtful. It wasn't immediately that Irma realized Anna was subtly and almost expertly turning her son against his wife. She overheard bits of conversations and pieced together the rest. Irma understood that Anna had a unique hold over her husband. Sergio had spent his entire life seeking his mother's approval, and little had changed since then. This realization was deeply unpleasant. Irma knew that to save her family, she needed to find a way to get Anna and Christie to move out. As for Miguel, Irma had no complaints about him. The teenager thrived in the apartment, enjoying his own desk, help with homework, and attention. He got along wonderfully with Mina, Irma's daughter. Mina had grown enough that Irma now felt comfortable letting her go out with Miguel. They went to amusement parks, the movies, or just played in the yard. Irma was confident Miguel looked after Mina better than any babysitter, never taking his eyes off her. In the end, it was Irma herself who suggested this arrangement to her husband. "If our finances allow, let's buy an apartment. We'll put it in our name, but Christie and Anna can live there separately. It'll be better for everyone. And for us, it'll be a profitable investment. Real estate always holds its value and only appreciates." Sergio thought it over, discussed it with his relatives, and decided his wife's suggestion was more than reasonable. The family had savings, and at that point, Sergio was earning very well. Soon, Anna and Christie moved out, and Irma finally breathed a sigh of relief. Once again, she was the mistress of her own home. By the way, they decided not to dismantle Miguel's room. The nephew still often stayed over, even more frequently than at his own home. Firstly, he had everything he needed for studying there: a quiet environment, a proper workspace, and a powerful computer. Secondly, in Irma and Sergio's house, no one scolded or insulted him. Irma had enrolled Miguel in an online programming course, and he quickly started making remarkable progress. She was delighted. Finally, the teenager had found something he was passionate about. Before, he had been aimlessly hanging out with lazy friends, and Irma had worried that he might end up in bad company out of boredom. Irma worried, but not his grandmother or mother. It turned out that neither Anna nor Christie cared about Miguel at all. Both had wanted a daughter instead of him. But even Mina, the granddaughter and niece, didn't matter to them. It was paradoxical. Irma no longer let it bother her. That's just how Anna and Christie were, Sergio's relatives. So Irma resolved to accept them as they were. After all, a peaceful truce was better than a bitter feud. She avoided interacting with them whenever possible, but Sergio still visited them occasionally to fix a faucet or rearrange furniture. Irma suspected, though she had no solid proof, that Christie and Anna tried to turn Sergio against her. He often came back from their place agitated and immediately started complaining dinner wasn't ready or the house wasn't clean. Irma reminded her husband that she also worked and got tired. Plus, she managed to drive Mina to her extracurricular activities after a full day at the office. It seemed to work. Life went on. Mina was growing up and making her parents proud with her achievements. She was already in first grade. Miguel, on the other hand, was now in his final year of high school and planning to apply to a prestigious university in the capital to study programming. Thanks to the many competitions he had won, his acceptance was practically guaranteed. He looked forward to his bright new future. Meanwhile, Miguel was a huge help to Irma with Mina. He picked her up from after-school care whenever her mother worked late. Unlike Anna and Christie, Miguel was reliable, and Irma trusted him completely. She knew he wouldn't forget to pick up Mina. He would bring her home, feed her, check her homework, and even entertain her. Miguel still loved spending time at Irma and Sergio's house. He felt drawn to the home where he was treated with warmth and attention. On more than one occasion, he had told Irma how grateful he was for her care. He remembered everything, how Irma played with him, taught him to read and count, and helped him with his homework. "If you hadn't signed me up for those programming courses, who knows where I'd be now," Miguel said one day. "Back then, I got involved with some bad kids out of boredom and frustration. But this caught my interest and pulled me in. Now, I'm just a step away from being a student at a prestigious university. I'll remember this for the rest of my life." Irma found Miguel's words comforting. Over the years, he had become far more than just a relative. She was also surprised by how sensitive and grateful teenagers could be. All in all, Irma's life wasn't bad, despite occasional criticism and misunderstandings from her husband and the strained relationship with his mother and sister, who had a huge influence on Sergio. He was still trying to please them, to earn their approval and attention, as if he were still a teenager trying to fill the role of head of the family after his father's death. Sergio felt responsible for his relatives. Of course, he loved his wife and daughter and always tried to make them happy, but his mother's and sister's opinions were what truly mattered to him. It was unpleasant, but something Irma could learn to accept and live with. Her world turned upside down when Mina was diagnosed with a serious and frightening condition. The little girl was often tired, pale, and complaining of headaches. Miguel, who frequently picked Mina up from school, would call Irma to tell her Mina wasn't feeling well. Irma took her daughter to the doctor, and Mina underwent the necessary tests. The day the doctor delivered the diagnosis was one Irma would never forget. In that moment, her life changed forever. Mina needed consistent, serious treatment, medications, injections, and physical therapy. Anna offered to help. Since she was already at home most of the time, she would pick up Mina after school and take her to the hospital. Miguel also offered his help, but with his final year of school, lessons, and extracurriculars, he simply didn't have the time to manage everything. Sergio was still working long hours and couldn't take time off, and Irma didn't want to burden him. He was the primary breadwinner, and now they needed money more than ever. Let him work, everyone had their role to play. Whatever Anna's flaws, Mina was her granddaughter, and in this difficult time, the older woman stepped up to help. Irma appreciated that. However, there were times Anna forgot to take Mina to her treatments. Once, she overslept. Then came endless complaints about her own health. Irma was deeply worried. The treatment couldn't be interrupted for even a day. Mina's condition was worsening. She could no longer attend school and was now studying remotely, but even that was becoming too much for her. Irma tried to impress upon Anna the importance of regular hospital visits. "You understand, right? The procedures can't be missed. It's very dangerous." Yes, I'm sorry," Anna would say, apologetically. "It won't happen again." But it did, again and again. Irma tried appealing to Sergio to intervene. She knew he disliked it when she criticized his mother, but she had no choice. Predictably, Sergio responded with indignation. He immediately began listing all Anna had done for him and all the hardships she had endured. "I won't allow you to insult my mother in my own home. A mother is sacred." Irma didn't argue or try to prove her point. She didn't have the energy or time for it. All her focus had to go toward her daughter's treatment. During this difficult period, Miguel became Irma's true ally. Despite the heavy demands of school and preparing for exams, he always found time to take Mina to the park, read to her, play with her, and help her with her lessons. In those moments, Irma could at least relax a little. The greatest help Miguel provided was his unwavering teenage belief in a positive outcome. He never said, "If Mina gets better," only, "When Mina gets better or after she recovers." It was always when, never if. Irma had to quit her job, and Sergio supported her decision. He, too, was deeply worried about their daughter and was relieved that Mina would now have constant care. "That's how it should be," he said. "We're her parents. It's our responsibility to get her back on her feet. We can't just push our problems onto others." These were Sergio's words, but Irma recognized them as coming straight from his mother. Over the years, she had learned to tell when this was happening. Now, Irma devoted herself entirely to her daughter. Sergio was at work from morning until night. Irma's parents lived far away in another city and could only support her over the phone. As for Anna and Christie, they continued to go about their own lives, rarely visiting the apartment where a gravely ill child lived. The atmosphere was understandably somber now, and they preferred to avoid it. Anna would occasionally stop by, but Irma often wished she wouldn't. Visits meant serving coffee and offering cookies or candy and entertaining her with conversation. Before Anna arrived, Irma spent a long time cleaning the kitchen, which was now filled with medicine and equipment keeping Mina alive. After Anna left, Irma always felt weighed down and sad. During their conversations, Anna frequently hinted that Mina's illness was somehow Irma's fault. She hadn't fed her properly, hadn't dressed her warmly enough, hadn't caught the early signs of the disease. Anna never outright accused her. If she had, Irma would have snapped back. But it was clear that Anna considered Irma to blame for Mina's condition. Then Miguel, Mina's helper and best friend, who could always make her laugh, left for university. But before he did, he had a serious conversation with Irma. "Irma, maybe I should stay here with you," Miguel said one day, looking straight into her eyes. "I can apply later. How will you manage with Mina without me?" Those words filled Irma's heart with warmth. Once again, she realized how deeply she trusted Miguel and how much he cared. But Miguel was still young. Yes, it would be harder without his support, but he needed to study. Irma couldn't let him give up his chance to attend a prestigious university in the capital, a goal he had worked so hard to achieve. Without hesitation, she protested and insisted he go. Miguel frequently called to ask how Mina was doing and to share details about his life as a student. He was thriving, excelling academically, working part-time, making new friends, and even starting a relationship. Interestingly, Miguel only told Irma about Alicia, his girlfriend. He didn't feel the need to share such details with his mother or grandmother, but he trusted Irma completely. She was glad to have that bond with him. Talking with Miguel, the boy she had known since he was a little child, had become fascinating. He had grown into a thoughtful, caring, and responsible young man, and Irma felt justifiably proud of the part she had played in his upbringing. Miguel openly acknowledged her influence many times. Meanwhile, Irma fought like a fierce tigress, taking on her daughter's illness head-on. She sought out doctors and researched new treatment methods. Sergio worked even harder, taking on full responsibility for their finances. Each parent had taken on their share of the burden, and both were stretched to their limits, exhausted in every sense. At first, the illness seemed to win. Mina had to be admitted to intensive care multiple times. The doctor's warnings that there were no guarantees sent chills down Irma's spine. It often felt like a losing battle, so dire was the situation. There were moments when she wanted to give up, completely drained of energy. But Irma would steel herself, shut out all doubts, and keep fighting for her daughter's life. Mina grew weaker and thinner, becoming almost translucent. For a time, she couldn't even get out of bed. Then, Miguel found a professor in the capital who specialized in complex cases. He explained Mina's situation to him. By that point, all the other doctors had given up, but this professor agreed to take her on as part of an experimental treatment. Irma connected with the professor via video call, explaining every detail of Mina's illness and showing him all the medical records. "This is exactly the type of patient I specialize in," said the elderly, gray-haired man on the screen, visibly pleased. His eyes shone with enthusiasm. At that moment, Irma felt an inner sense, a deep intuition, that everything would turn out well. But she was afraid to trust her instincts, afraid to hope too much. Mina began receiving the experimental treatment, and at first, her condition worsened. Irma was ready to stop the treatment, but the professor insisted on continuing. "I understand," he said. "It's terrifying to see your child like this, especially when there's no 100% guarantee of recovery. But you don't have any other options. If I were in your place, I'd take the risk." Irma thought long and hard and realized the doctor's reasoning was sound. Sergio supported her decision. Ana, however, had her own opinions. She criticized the parents' choice and cautioned against trusting the unknown professor. "He's just taking your money," Ana said with pursed lips. "The child is hopeless. You'd be better off using that money to pay for her care in a good institution. She'd be better off there than at home or in hospitals." Irma was ready to pounce on her mother-in-law for those words. An institution? Hopeless? How could Ana say such things? But Irma held back. She needed every ounce of her strength and energy to focus on Mina's treatment. Wasting it on arguments was not an option. Time passed, and suddenly, Mina began to improve. Her test results stabilized. Her appearance brightened. She was laughing again, watching cartoons, eating with appetite, becoming her old self. Soon, Mina was running through the hospital corridors with her new friends, and Irma watched in disbelief, overwhelmed with happiness. Sergio, too, breathed a sigh of relief. He had aged significantly during the years their daughter hovered between life and death. For 3 long years, they endured this difficult journey. Now, Mina was practically a healthy child. The professor who had taken her case was overjoyed by the victory. For the next couple of years, she'll need special care and rehabilitation, as well as constant monitoring of her blood work, the professor explained. But I can say with confidence that the disease is gone for good. We've literally snatched Mina from its grip. What's more, now thousands of children worldwide in similar situations will have access to the right treatment. Life began to return to normal. Slowly but surely, everything fell back into place. Mina went back to school. It took effort for her to catch up with her peers, but she succeeded. Irma, meanwhile, still couldn't return to work because Mina's rehabilitation required her full involvement. But these were joyful challenges, and Irma felt completely happy. The danger was behind them, and that was what mattered most. Miguel, during his holidays, continued to spend as much time as possible with Irma and Sergio. After graduating from university, he returned to his hometown with Alicia, his fiancée, and asked Irma if they could stay with her. "You know how my mom and grandma are," he said. "They'll say all sorts of things to Alicia." Irma nodded. Of course, she knew her sister-in-law and mother-in-law all too well. She happily welcomed Miguel and his fiancée into her home. Alicia turned out to be a beautiful and delightful young woman, and Mina was thrilled to have the visitors. Everything was falling into place for Miguel. As a talented and promising graduate, he was immediately hired by a major IT company. When he spoke about his new job, his eyes sparkled with excitement, and Irma couldn't help but feel proud of him. A few more years passed. Mina grew stronger, and rehabilitation was no longer necessary. She went to school and even started doing sports, specifically swimming, as the professor had strongly recommended physical activity for her. One day, Irma realized she could return to work. The life of a homemaker no longer satisfied her. Something was missing. She felt like she was suffocating within the four walls. Cooking, cleaning, helping with homework, it all felt like an endless Groundhog Day. Once upon a time, Irma had been a promising and in-demand professional. Starting from scratch after such a long break was daunting, but every journey begins with a single step. Irma knew she had to take that step. Sergio supported her decision, as did Mina. Thus, Irma returned to the same company where she had worked before taking maternity leave. Naturally, everything had changed. There were new people in leadership roles, and almost none of her former colleagues remained. After all, so much time had passed. Mina had grown into a teenager by then. Irma had to learn a lot from scratch. Sometimes, she stayed late at the office, but for the first time in years, she felt happy and fulfilled. Her life seemed to be back on track, and everything was going well. However, Christie and Anna cast a slight shadow on her newfound peace. As soon as Mina fully recovered, they reappeared at the house, becoming frequent visitors once again. Both were constantly asking for help and trying to guilt Irma with familial ties. Christie still wasn't working. Miguel had grown up to become a successful, independent adult, but new excuses emerged, this time about health problems. Like Anna before her, Christie now bounced between doctors, searching for serious diagnoses. Anna, being too old to work, lived with Christie on her modest pension, which barely covered their needs. Of course, they didn't have enough money, so they often showed up at Irma's house in the evenings for coffee, chats about Mina, and family bonding. They stayed late into the night. For them, there was no work to wake up for in the morning. They filled Irma's ears with gossip about neighbors, sharing information that was utterly uninteresting and useless to her. The cherry on top was their frequent borrowing of money, always accompanied by complaints about their hard lives. This was despite the fact that, as Irma knew for sure, Sergio sent them a substantial monthly allowance. Irma lent them money anyway, fully aware it would never be repaid. How could she refuse, knowing how much her husband cherished his relatives? She didn't want to give them any reason to spark another conflict. At work, things were going well. Irma was thriving as a professional. Despite her long absence, she quickly caught up, grasping things on the fly. Her managers valued her hard work and responsibility. Irma climbed the career ladder, eventually being promoted to head a large department, a position with significant responsibilities, including occasional business trips. This new role didn't sit well with Sergio, who was used to coming home to a clean house, a hot meal, and a daughter who had been supervised and had finished her homework. During his wife's trips, he would have to take on those responsibilities himself, and he wasn't ready for that. The trips weren't frequent, and Irma always informed Sergio in advance so he could adjust his workload accordingly. Everything was manageable until an urgent business trip came up. Irma tried calling Sergio, but he didn't answer. That wasn't unusual, he could have been in a meeting or misplaced his phone. When Irma returned home that evening to quickly pack for her trip, she found Sergio in a cheerful mood. "Mom called. She and Christie are coming back," he said, clearly delighted by the news. Anna and Christie had been away for a whole month visiting relatives in a village. Sergio had been worried about them. He still felt responsible for his mother and sister. Irma often wondered how they had managed to keep such a hold on him. Sergio was strong, independent, and decisive with everyone else, never letting anyone take advantage of him. But his mother and sister? They were sacred. Irma suspected the roots of this attitude lay in his childhood and teenage years. She even considered suggesting therapy for her husband. His behavior wasn't normal, and Sergio himself was suffering from it. "Send them my regards," Irma replied with a polite smile as she packed her suitcase. "What do you mean, send regards? Where are you going?" Sergio asked, confused. "I have an urgent business trip. I'll be away for 3 days. I've left you a detailed message outlining everything, where and when Mina needs to go. Swimming, school, and her tests on the 3rd are a must." "What do you mean, you're leaving?" Sergio's anger was already surfacing. My mother and sister are coming back after being away for so long, and you're not even going to set the table for them? That's just disrespectful. Irma tried to keep her composure. Lately, Sergio had been growing increasingly sensitive to what he perceived as her lack of respect for his relatives. She suspected Anna and Christie were behind this, stirring the pot as usual. You can order food for them from a restaurant if they're so hungry and can't cook for themselves, she said calmly. There you go again, speaking about my mother in an inappropriate tone. Sergio snapped, his temper boiling over. Mom's right, you hate them and constantly belittle them. All they want is some family time. Sergio, Silence, he shouted. You're not going anywhere. You'll stay home and prepare dinner, turkey with sauce, Mom loves that. And Christie wants Caesar salad with shrimp. I'll transfer you money for groceries right now. Do you realize that if I stay, I'll lose my job? Irma asked quietly. That job of yours isn't worth it. You're always traveling, staying late at the office. Stay home and take care of the child. Mina is growing up like a weed. Christie was absolutely right about that. Irma felt her fury rise to the surface. She must have looked so enraged in that moment that Sergio actually stopped talking for once and listened. Irma let everything out, finally unloading all the frustration that had been building up inside her for years. She told him about Anna and Christie's audacity and hostility, thinly veiled under a pretense of friendliness. About their constant visits and parasitic behavior. She reminded Sergio that his mother and sister had been nowhere to be found when the family needed help most. She even brought up Miguel, who had succeeded in life largely because of her efforts. His own mother and grandmother hadn't cared about him until he became a successful, well-earning adult. Luckily, Miguel didn't let them manipulate him. He saw through them, unlike his uncle, and kept his distance, earning the label of an ungrateful son and grandson. When she finished, Sergio sank into a chair, drained. Irma, having said her piece, felt a sense of relief. She didn't regret a single word. She realized she had been wrong to stay silent for so many years. She should have been vocal about her discontent, set boundaries for Anna and Christie, and explained the reality to Sergio instead of protecting his feelings. In a way, she blamed herself for allowing things to escalate to this point. But she wouldn't tolerate it any longer. She watched her husband, waiting for his reaction. His expression gave away nothing. I hope you understand, he finally said, that after this, we can't live under the same roof anymore. We're not a family. You hate the people closest to me. How can we stay together after a confession like that? The closest person to you is our daughter, Irma replied, her voice trembling. She realized then that Sergio had already made his decision. Get out, he said, barely containing his anger. Leave. I can't stand to look at you. Get out of my house. Irma nodded silently. The apartment did indeed belong to Sergio. He had purchased it during Mina's illness, a time when Irma was too overwhelmed to think about anything else. Anna had advised her son to handle the paperwork in a way that ensured the property remained solely his, even though it was bought during the marriage. Anna knew how to navigate legal loopholes when it suited her. Fear crept into Irma. Where would she go now, with a child in tow? She didn't have her own apartment. But she did have savings. Irma had been putting money aside for a summer vacation by the sea with Mina, planning to spend an entire month on the coast. Now, that money would have to go toward renting a place to live. At least she had this safety cushion to fall back on. Irma unlocked the door to her apartment, her own apartment. She hadn't expected this turn of events, but now, just a month after parting ways with Sergio, her life had changed drastically. Irma and her daughter were living in the capital. She was working for a major company, earning a salary she could have only dreamed of back in her hometown. Irma felt free and independent. Only now did she realize how much the situation with her mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and Sergio, who always sided with them, had weighed her down. Now, even her breathing felt lighter. Help had come, and what help it was, from Miguel. One day, He had called to check on her. At first, Irma didn't want to burden her nephew with her problems, but he sensed something was wrong from the tone of her voice and insisted she tell him. So, Irma shared everything with Miguel. He laughed warmly into the phone. "Well, it's about time you figured it out. I've seen how hard things were for you since I was in school. I could never understand why you put up with all of it. And now, you've broken free from that family circus? That's amazing." Miguel's reaction made Irma see her situation in a new light. It truly was a relief, not a tragedy. The only regret was being left without a home of her own at her age. But Miguel, as if reading her thoughts, called her a week later with surprising news. He had bought her and Mina an apartment in the capital. "It's not far from where Alicia and I live. So, hurry up and move in. Your new home is waiting, and I'll help you find a job." It was an incredibly generous gift, and Irma didn't know how to accept it. That's when Miguel explained just how successful he was as a programmer. He even showed her his income statement to prove that buying an apartment like this was well within his means. "Irma, you're the only one in the family who treated me like a real person. My mother and grandmother didn't care about me at all. But you're the reason I became who I am today. You know, I often hear people say that close family isn't always about blood relations. That's exactly how it's been in my life. We're close, and that means being there for each other and helping out." Irma was so moved by Miguel's words that she cried. Meanwhile, Anna and Christie, upon learning that Miguel had bought Irma an apartment and helped her land a high-paying job, were furious. They believed that Miguel, as a successful young man, should be showering them, his mother and grandmother, with wealth, not helping some aunt. One day, Anna and Christie showed up in the capital, demanding that Irma let them stay in her apartment. They reminded her that they were Mina's blood relatives and tried to guilt her into allowing them to move in. Their real intent was to claim a share of the apartment. They even insisted that Irma pay them a hefty sum for the home, arguing that as Miguel's blood relatives, they had a right to his assets. But this time, Irma stood her ground. She didn't let her brazen in-laws into her home or her life. Miguel had shown her an excellent example of how to protect her boundaries. Anna and Christie were forced to leave empty-handed, grumbling bitterly. To make matters worse for them, they had to spend a considerable amount of money on a hotel during their stay. Irma had finally closed that chapter of her life, and she felt stronger and freer than ever.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.